The lantern light trembled against the barn's weathered walls. Samuel Hayes thought he was alone that night. Just him, his cattle, and the ghosts he'd learned to live with. But when he pushed open that old barn door, he found something that would change everything. A girl, chained to a post like an animal. And when she looked up, the air left his lungs. Her eyes, green, bright as spring after rain, were the exact same shade as his wife's. The wife he'd buried 3 years ago beneath 6 feet of Colorado earth. From that moment, nothing made sense. Because the dead don't come back, do they? If you're already hooked, make sure to hit that like button. It helps more people discover stories like this one. And if you love emotional, human tales from the Wild West that mix mystery, heartbreak, and redemption, subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Now, saddle up, because what Samuel discovers next will shake even the toughest soul. The wind howled across the Colorado plains at night, carrying with it the scent of rain and old memories. Samuel Hayes had long stopped expecting surprises in life. His days were quiet now, just him, the horses, and the echo of a woman's laughter he hadn't heard in 3 long years. But as the storm clouds rolled in, something felt off. The lantern in his hand flickered when he pushed open the heavy barn door. He expected the familiar creak of timber, the soft shuffling of his mare. Instead, he saw chains, real iron chains. And then, in the far stall, movement. A girl, maybe 16, maybe 17, sat huddled in the straw, her wrists bound to a post. The metal had cut deep into her skin, raw and red. She didn't scream, didn't even flinch. She just lifted her head slowly, and in that single heartbeat, Samuel froze. Those eyes, green, bright, the same shade as fresh grass after spring rain. Martha's eyes. The lantern trembled in his hand. For a second, he couldn't breathe. His wife had been gone 3 years, taken by the fever that swept through the valley. He'd buried her himself under a cottonwood tree near the creek. And yet here they were again, staring at him from a stranger's face. "Please," the girl whispered, "don't let them take me back." Samuel's throat tightened. "Who did this to you?" Her voice came out soft, shaking. "Men from Crow's Ridge. Said I belonged to them now." He glanced at the bruises along her arms, the torn fabric of her dress. The fury that rose inside him wasn't loud. It was quiet, cold, and heavy. Whoever had chained her here wasn't a man. They were monsters wearing boots. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena," she said, eyes darting toward the door. "Elena Cartwright." The name meant nothing to him, but those eyes meant everything. Samuel had spent years trying to forget that shade of green, drowning it in work and whiskey. Now, the past had found him in the most impossible way. He reached for the ring of keys hanging by the door. "Hold still." "You don't understand what you're doing," she said quickly. "They'll come for me. For you. They'll burn everything you own. Then I'll rebuild it." His tone was calm, almost steady. "But I won't stand by and let this happen." The first shackle fell open with a sharp click. The second soon followed. Elena gasped as blood returned to her hands. Outside, a coyote howled, long, mournful, and distant. The wind picked up, scattering hay across the barn floor. Samuel helped her to her feet, steadying her as she swayed. "Can you walk?" "Barely," she said, "but I'll manage." He nodded toward the farmhouse. "Let's get you inside before that storm breaks." Neither of them noticed the faint glow of lanterns moving across the far ridge or the riders approaching through the dark, because sometimes fate gives you no warning. Only a second chance you never saw coming. The storm broke hard over the valley. Thunder rolled like cannon fire as Samuel bolted the farmhouse door and set the lantern on the table. Elena sat near the stove, trembling, her wet hair clinging to her face. Outside, hoofbeats echoed, faint at first, then clearer, steady, purposeful. "They are coming," she whispered. Samuel's grip tightened on the rifle hanging over the fireplace. "How many?" "4, maybe 5. Their leader's name is Dutch Carver." He'd heard that name before, whispered in saloons, spat out by lawmen. Dutch was the kind of man who carved his reputation out of fear. The hoofbeat stopped. Then came the knock, 3 heavy thuds that rattled the old door. "Samuel Hayes," a deep voice called. We're looking for something that don't belong to you." Elena's breath hitched. Samuel's mind raced. He could hand her over, claim ignorance, and they'd ride away. He could go back to the quiet, lonely life he'd built since Martha's death. Safe. Empty. But then he looked at those green eyes again. Martha's eyes. No, family eyes. Something inside him shifted, solidified like cooling steel. "Stay hidden," he whispered. He leveled a rifle toward the window and called out, "What kind of something?" "The kind that breathes," Dutch replied, his tone dark with amusement. "Now open up before I lose my patience." Lightning flashed, turning the yard white for a heartbeat. Samuel saw 5 men out there, rifles slung, horses restless. He took a slow breath, the storm matching the rhythm of his pulse. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," he said. Silence. Then the world exploded. A gunshot cracked through the window. Samuel ducked, glass raining across the floor. He fired back, catching one of the riders in the shoulder. Elena scrambled beside him, loading the spare rifle with steady hands. "2 down," she said, voice shaking but strong. Dutch roared from outside. "Burn the place. Smoke them out." The smell of kerosene hit before the flames. Fire licked the edge of the porch, creeping toward the barn, the same barn where he'd found her. They ran for the back door, but Dutch's remaining men were already there, blocking their escape. Samuel raised his rifle again. "You don't want to do this." "Oh, I do," Dutch said, stepping forward. "The girl's mine. Got papers to prove it." Elena's chin lifted. "Show him. Dutch, show him those papers." Dutch smirked until Elena pulled something from her dress pocket. A small silver locket. Inside wasn't a photo, but folded legal documents. "This belonged to my mother," she said, her voice trembling with fire. Her name was Catherine Cartwright, before she married Catherine Mills. Samuel's heart nearly stopped. Martha's maiden name. Mills. Elena met his gaze. "She told me about a man named Samuel Hayes. Said if anything ever happened, I should find him." Dutch sneer faltered. "You got nothing. Girl." "She's got everything," Samuel said coldly, "including proof you forged those debts and killed a federal marshal to cover it up." The sound of galloping hooves thundered from the ridge. 6 riders appeared through the rain, stars glinting on their chests. U.S. Marshals. Dutch turned pale. You sent for them." "Since the night you poisoned my mother," Elena said quietly. The marshals surrounded the outlaws, shackling them without mercy. Dutch's threats were drowned by the storm as they dragged him away. When the noise faded, Samuel stood with Elena on the porch, watching the fire in the barn die to embers. "You knew my wife," he said softly. "Your mother, she was her sister." Elena nodded, tears glinting in the flicker of lightning. "Mama said you were the only man she ever trusted." Samuel looked out at the horizon, the same horizon he'd once buried his heart beneath. But tonight, something different stirred in him. Not grief, not loss, hope. He placed a weathered hand on Elena's shoulder. "You've got a home here now, as long as you want it." And as dawn broke over the scorched valley, the ghosts of the past finally rested. Not because Samuel had forgotten, but because he'd found someone worth fighting for again. And that was the story of Samuel Hayes, a man who thought he'd buried his heart with his wife, but found it again in the most unexpected way, through the eyes of a lost girl who turned out to be family. Out here in the West, life is a cool way of testing a person's soul. Sometimes it breaks you. Sometimes it brings you back to who you were meant to be. Samuel didn't just free that girl from her chains. He freed himself from guilt, from silence, from the ghost of the woman he loved. And maybe that's a quiet truth about redemption. It doesn't always come riding in with gunfire and glory. Sometimes it walks through your barn door, trembling and afraid, and gives you one last chance to do what's right. If this story touched your heart even a little, take a second to like this video. It tells YouTube that stories like this one matter. And if you want more emotional tales from the untamed heart of the Wild West, subscribe and ring that bell, because there are more stories coming. Stories of courage, loss, and the kind of love that never really dies. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the past doesn't come back to haunt you. It comes back to heal you. Faced with Cowper hat,